And so from Africa and other distant places, we see people, we see different raids, we see police chasing these immigrants, people without rights. A woman from Ecuador, she is being abused, being hit, but she will not say anything because she has no rights, no human rights. People who live as slaves, there's a lot of parts of the world where they are seen as slaves, they are abused, they have no rights. These stressors are also these potential situations. Really, it's not the same thing to have a bad day. I mean, we all overcome that while having a bad day for years. To control a situation provides certain tranquility when you're able to overcome that, but when you are unable to overcome that, the anguish is much more extreme. The attachment, the fear, not knowing what's going to happen, and they don't have any social groups that are there to support them, or a government that supports them. No support at all. Where is their social support group? For example, they also have that stress, imagine that change of culture, the fear, trying to survive, not seeing any door that opens. So really a different migration, very adverse problems and bigger problems that they're facing. And as if those problems were not enough, I think that the health system does not intervene adequately, and so now we are a new stressor, a new problem, because we see professionals who see this and say this is not of relevance, it's not important. I don't know if because of racism or not having that human feeling. It's very easy to confuse these multiple stress factors with psychosis, with different illnesses, and we are being confused. We treat these people as them being ill or sick, and we prescribe medications that have adverse side effects in them. We are now causing more medical problems. They don't need all of that. And so I would say this is another factor that sometimes in the medical field or health system, we are causing this new stressor. The Ulyssess syndrome is a sort of mobbing when it's a push factor. It's really, what does somebody do when they want to kick out their neighbor? Well, they make their life impossible. Well, these immigrants are faced with situations in which their life is made impossible, and so they are sent that message to their place of origin. Don't come to this country. It's a sort of mobbing. This is a map of the recent migrations. We see a lot the migration from north to south, but south to south is as important as north to south, meaning millions of immigrants are also moving from Africa, Latin America, Asia, and inclusively in very much more worse conditions, in corrupt places, no protection, faced with bigger problems and abuses and much more difficult situations. 71 million immigrants who have left their place of origin. And the United Nations has calculated that this number is going to duplicate in a few years. They will live here without undocumented in very adverse situations. These are some images that you probably have seen. This is a train called The Beast, where we see that people are living terrible situations, like we've seen so many being killed. These situations are just tremendous. We also see this is a global migration. We see that in Spain we are seeing our people from Argentina and also people from Bolivia. This is something that's happening worldwide, very complex situation, abuse against the immigrants in Buenos Aires, Argentinos against Bolivianos, and other countries. It's a very complex world in which we are living presently. The borders being externalized in Morocco, and we see walls that are being built the south of Mexico to the walls or borders so that people don't come to the north. So we can say that these people live one of the worst nightmares possible, imaginary, being alone, no resources, no solution to their problems, being ill, needing help, and nobody rendering that assistance. It's a tremendous situation. It's not a nightmare, it's reality. If this were a nightmare, you wash your face and wake up and it's over, but this is a horror. This is the daily life of millions. This is what they're living. And so like we were saying, within Africa and Asia, this is where many times these extreme situations are the situations that they're living. So what are the symptoms that we see in this population? We see variable symptoms. It is logic that all of the stress will affect the entire organism. It is altered for years. From an extreme stress, we have here a small scheme or structure of how this affects the entire organism or body, the metabolic, hormonal, the hepatic, and all of the entire system, circulatory system, the sexual aspect, everything. People are being affected in a way in which we see these variable symptoms. In the depression, be aware these immigrants do not have symptoms of apathy. They are proactive. They do not have thoughts of death. They want to bring their children. They have a lot of projects, but they cannot bring about their projects. They are sad, but they are not ill. For example, the crying, that's not related with depression. That person who is depressed does not tend to cry because the depressive person or does not cry no longer is wanting the help. So we are confusing many times these symptoms with the mental illness symptoms. The variable symptomology, the different the headaches, the muscle pains, and because of the common and frequent headaches and migraines, we say the migraine because it's so related with the symptom of the immigrants. Surprisingly, we also know that the headaches have to do with tension, with the thoughts of trying to not think about the problems. When we ask, how is your headache? It's like a bomb about, yes, a bomb. Really, the confusion, that disorientation in the psychological level, and also evidently these people are now interpreting this according to their culture, when maybe I've been witchcraft, evil eye, somebody has done something to me, sorcery. But like an immigrant said, do you think that you have been sorcery? Oh no, I think it's the laws of this country. That's the evil eye, that's the sorcery. So they really understand what's social and cultural. This is a study that we've done in Spain. In the mental health consultations, the 17% have a multiple stress factors, therefore they are not diagnosed as being depressed. They are not also ignored, or we don't consider they're not living anything, but this helps us so that we give a name to a reality and differentiate this from a diagnosis. This is a magazine that can be seen through internet, and we have here the statistics and the data, and we will talk a little bit about the differential diagnosis. We have said that the Ulyssess syndrome, there are no basic symptoms of depression, no apathy, no thoughts of death. I would say that in the phenomenal, or San Ignacio de Loyola explained this as isolation. There's really different types of sadness. The mental health sadness is one, but there are different types of sadness. For example, there's a book that was written in the U.S., The Lost of Sadness, in which points out how we are converting all type of sadness and relating this with depression. This is part of art, literature, of music. Well, imagine if there is no sadness. Sadness is part of life, of the drama of living. I would inclusively say that the loss of sadness would be the end of art, of the poetry, of the writing. The gods do not write. It's the human beings that do the writing because we have emotions. How can we diagnose then an immigrant who is willing to walk 20 kilometers if they offer him a job? People who are depressed do not run to look for a job. I think we are confusing this in regards to the diagnosis. A Spanish writer said, sometimes I feel a certain type of sadness that I think it would be very unfortunate if I didn't feel that sadness. It's a complex issue, the aspect of sadness, and a philosopher of the U.S., he would say, Richard, lost the sadness, we would no longer be humans, we would be something else. And in the New York Times article last year, the director of the manual of diagnosis critiqued the SM4 manual, and he also spoke about the symptoms and the diagnosis, and they do not differentiate the grief and the sadness from the depression, and this is something that has been going on for a long time. They do not define this correctly. The grief and depression, this is very important because we are prescribing and we are diagnosing something that shouldn't be diagnosed that way. I will no longer talk about those technical diagnoses anymore in detail, and I think we saw some of that information yesterday for those who were here, but I will say that depression is a concept that we are all familiar with, but there is a diagnosis that is not sometimes diagnosed in immigrants, and that's alcoholism. Because of the culture, it is considered that it's part of the culture, it's part of the social aspect, drinking, but this can have terrible consequences in violence and in abuse, in accidents at work, in relationships. However, sometimes this is not seen as what it is, and what it is we don't see as what it is. We are sometimes not taking this into consideration while diagnosing. So, for example, what happens with an immigrant who is living these extreme stressors that we call the Ulyssess stressors, that isolation, that fear, that helplessness? An immigrant who had already a previous medical history, this medical situation will become worse. So if the paranoid is being put in a situation in which he is faced with an extreme situation, he will get worse. if somebody does not have that mental illness, but he has that predisposition,